Royal facts about George V. The Victorian family of Queen Victoria was full of scandal and drama, and as the son of Edward VII, George was not void of this family drama himself. George was put forward into the front and centre of this drama, as well as having a tragic relationship with his controversial elder son, and that meant that George barely had a moment of peace in his life. George was born into his role of the spare heir on the 3rd of June 1865. His place of birth was Marlborough House, right in the heart of London. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. His mother was Princess Alexandra of Denmark, and his father was Albert Edward, the future King Edward VII. He was part of a large brood of children of 6, and despite his father being away on various rendezvous with many mistresses and women of the night, he lived in a privileged, large and luxurious mansion with his prince and princess siblings, and his parents were far from ordinary, and their arranged marriage was far from a fairy tale. George was the grandson of one of the most powerful people in the world, Queen Victoria. His grandmother's relationship with his father was strained, and she did not trust him with the royal duties 1 ounce. This meant that Edward had a lot of time on his hands and had to occupy himself somehow, and his hobbies were very controversial. Not only was he a disappointment to her, but she also blamed him for the untimely death of her husband, meaning she could barely even look at him. She took away all of his royal responsibilities and refused to allow him any involvement in the royal court at all. Although his father was able to have 6 children with his wife, for the majority of their marriage he was away, getting his end away. Despite his father's controversial behaviour and adultery towards his mother, George grew up in awe of his father, and he was mostly liked by the general public. Perhaps he was in awe of his father because he was blissfully unaware of his parents' double life. The childhood George was aware of was that of a happy royal family, but it would only become clearer as he grew older that his father was often absent for long periods of time. It is likely that he believed that his father was on official royal duties, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Prince Albert Edward eventually succeeded his mother and became King Edward VII, but before that he had another name, Dirty Bertie. His father was becoming a womanizer, and his wife had to accept that he would never be monogamous. She knew that he was sleeping around with mistresses, but she had to ignore it if she wished to be his queen consort and wife. It is believed that he had at least 55 mistresses, and those are just the ones that are known about. It was due to this behaviour that got him the nickname Dirty Bertie, which is not the best name to be associated with the future King of England. Bertie was unfazed by the nickname, and he continued to womanize his way through society with his 55 mistresses, as well as the prostitutes that he saw in the Parisian brothels. Yet for all his debauchery, Edward was remarkably discreet, and more often than not, the society gossip could only guess at who was sharing the prince's bed on a given night. Prince George was not originally destined to be the King of the UK, but tragically the death of his eldest brother, Prince Albert Victor, meant the crown fell at his feet. George was a second-born son, and there was only a year between the boys. They were educated alongside each other, with neither one gaining the title of a star student. Their father was also a young boy who did not get on with the royal education system, and so when it was evident that his sons were not interested either, he shipped them away from home in a bid to make real men of them. The Prince of Wales believed that the best way to become a royal man was to join the Royal Navy, and George's father sent both him and his brother off for training when he was just 12 years old, and 3 years later, at the age of 15, the pair of them entered service on HMS Bacante. His life on the ship did not involve active combat, and instead could resemble a holiday, travelling the world, than a strict boot camp for boys. Aboard the ship, George and his brother travelled the world together, They were privileged to visit the furthest reaches of the British Empire, from the Caribbean to South Africa to Australia. In 1881, they visited Japan, where the teenage George made a scandalous decision to get a tattoo of a blue and red dragon on his arm. George and his brother had endured many interesting events together, but as Albert Victor was to be king, his life was to take a different turn to George's. His brother was enrolled to Trinity College to study while he remained in the Navy. He was now a lonesome man without his brother as his sidekick, but a new love would enter his life instead when he met the woman of his dreams. George began serving with his uncle Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh in Malta. He was the best placed to show him the reins of being the spare heir to the throne, as his uncle was also the second-born son. During this trip, his uncle had brought his daughter, Princess Marie of Edinburgh, with him, and Marie was George's first cousin, but this didn't stop him from falling in love with her. Strangely enough, the love match was approved by the royal family, with his grandmother, father and uncle all approving. For the royal family, it seems like a match made in heaven. At least, it did for most of them. Others weren't so happy about it, and that's when the scheming began. Join me in part 2 to delve into how George's love life took an even stranger turn, from falling in love with his first cousin to marrying his dead brother's fiancée. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.